Hello, welcome to the live stream. It is Saturday, April 12th. I'm not sure if I'm showing up. Uh, doesn't look like I'm showing up. Oh, okay, now I think it's working. I was speaking for about a few minutes before it started to work. So I was, then I, once I realized my video was not showing, I started over. Um, so welcome to the live stream. Primals tells me I am showing up now. Okay, thanks for that feedback. Yeah, I've got a couple ways of testing it on my end, but it's good to hear your feedback as well. And I think I've got the correct mic on. Yeah, it looks like it. So I was just saying, I've been on a couple other shows recently. I was on one last night. Someone has I think over 24,000 subscribers on YouTube, and I called into his show, and he gave me permission to post my call on my channel. So eventually that will show up on my channel, um, maybe in within a couple weeks or so. And then there was another show that I was on, uh, much smaller channel, but I'll also be posting that eventually on my channel. So I'm pleased to be having these opportunities to appear on other shows. And I'm always looking for those opportunities. So if you all know of any shows that you think might be good for me to go on, feel free to let me know, or you can contact the host and have the host contact me. I want to spread Ayn Rand's ideas on many platforms, get the word out. So it helps to um, you all can help me with that. So, I make some efforts to get in touch with people, but you all might know people I'm not familiar with, who might be willing to have me. So we got six people here now. That's good. I don't think we have had that many people here this early in a stream. So maybe the algorithm is doing better for me now. Primal, I don't think I've seen you before. I don't recognize your name. So maybe you're new to my channel. Welcome to the channel if you are new. Um, Also, I was thinking, I haven't pitched my Patreon in a while, but I do have a Patreon. Um, so once I get to 1,000 subscribers, I can apply to monetize my channel. But I don't have to wait till that happens to receive donations. So if you all want to help support me grow, if you want to support me financially, you can sign up for my Patreon or send me something on PayPal. These are linked in my from my YouTube channel. If you go to the About section of my channel, you'll see the links to my Patreon and PayPal. Um, and that, I guess that would be a way, if you want priority, I would give priority. If you can take super chats, then I would prioritize those over non-super chats. If people want to engage with me in the chat or make a phone call, well, I guess it doesn't have to be a phone call, a Zoom call. I'm using Zoom now. I would give priority to people who make a financial contribution, and eventually hopefully I'll be able to take super chats after the channel gets big enough. But in the meantime, I can take Patreon and PayPal. So if you want to prioritize yourself, if you want to get more time or attention, from me, um, you can do that. There's a way to do that. Okay. One of my videos has been getting a lot of watch time recently, and I don't know why, but I did a live stream, I don't know, maybe a week or two ago. I'm going to look it up right now. And for some reason, it's been getting a lot of watch time. It is the one titled, where is it? Oh, here we go. Cory Booker and Healthcare, The Problem of Induction, Debate with a Majority Report Listener. So those are the three topics that appear in the title. And this was the stream, I don't know how long ago that, oh, it says 9 days ago. So April 3rd, about then. And that's been getting, it's gotten like, I think over 50 hours of watch time just on that one video. And it not even like on the day that I live streamed it, it was just like a couple days ago. So I live streamed it 9 days ago, but like 2 days ago, it started getting a lot of watch time and it's continued since then. So for some reason, I don't know if the algorithm has been pushing that out for some reason. It hasn't been getting particularly large number of views, but just the watch time. So I guess the people who do engage with it spend a larger than average time watching that video. And happy to see that. I'd be interested to know why. But anyways, little piece of news for my channel. See a comment has come in from Primal. Okay, so Primal asks, why is it so hard for people to understand how Ayn Rand bridges the is and ought gap? For me, it's the simplest, most rational thing. Why do people have so much difficulty with it? Well, I don't know. Off the top of my head, maybe I could speculate. So I was just thinking about that the other day, actually. Um, like how to, because someone raised it in my last live stream, I think that someone had called in and he raised that issue, and I was thinking about how I would address it. We didn't end up discussing it. It was just kind of it came up in passing, and then we went on to other issues. Um, but maybe we can talk some more about that now. See, hi John. John Wayne has come in. He says, I think understanding how Rand bridges the gap isn't easy either, but once you get it, especially if you frame it, says John. So I guess there's a couple questions. One is how do you bridge it? Another is why is it so hard for people to understand how you bridge it? Which I guess presupposes that it is hard for people to understand. And I guess the more fundamental question is how do you bridge it? Maybe we should talk some about that. And even more fundamental than that is just what is the issue? You know, what is it? What is this thing? This is-ought gap? And secondarily, how do you bridge it? Thirdly, why is it so hard for people to see how you bridge it? So uh, maybe we should start on that. That can be our first topic for today, and maybe that'll end up in the title. Usually, after these live streams, I'll see which topics were most prominent, and then I put those in the title to replace the default title that I have right now. Um, so maybe is ought gap will end up appearing in this title after the stream. And also, I would like to put this timestamps in the description for the major topics. So, all right, well, let's see if we can get into this a little bit. Um, So, can I give an explanation of what is the is ought gap? So, it's the idea, which is largely associated with Hume, David Hume, 18th century British philosopher, that there's no way to justify ought claims, that you ought to do such and such. Um, there's a basis for is claims. You can say such and such is the case, like today is Saturday, tomorrow is Sunday, but you can't justify any ought claims. At least that's the idea. There's no way to get from is claims to ought claims. Um, so, like, you ought to eat food, or you ought not to kill innocent people. You ought not to murder. You ought to be honest. Um, and then, now maybe you could just reframe those in terms of other terminology like good or bad. Like it is good to be honest. It is good to eat food. It is bad to murder. Um, s- but I think the same issue would apply. Like how do you get to claims about what's good or bad based on claims about what is the case? Um, so that's the issue. I don't know if that's enough to make the issue clear. If it's not, if anyone is unclear about what the issue is, feel free to say that in the chat and what's unclear about it, and then maybe I can expand more. But maybe I should just assume that's sufficient for now, at least, to explain what the issue is. So, how do you get from is claims to ought claims? Or maybe we could also say claims about what's good and bad. So, I've thought about this in the past for at irregular intervals, and I most recently was thinking about it just a day or two ago, and I was thinking maybe part of the way you to answer that is to cite something like pleasure or pain. These are givens in nature for they're just physiologically given to you as an infant. So before you've come up with any ideas about you don't really you haven't learned how to speak yet when you're an infant. You don't have words at the beginning, but from the very beginning, maybe even before you're born, you've got a nervous system, and that nervous system functions, and you can experience pleasure and pain. So a baby drinks milk, and that gives its pleasure. Or if the baby is hungry, it's uncomfortable, that's some kind of negative experience, whether it's pain or discomfort. Now, these are things you can directly experience, pleasure and pain. And I think, and this has come up in a lot of my uh, discussions and debates on my channel. I think you might need to refer to something like pleasure and pain in order to explain how you get ethics or morality off the ground. Like where do good and bad, where do right and wrong ultimately come from? I think they ultimately come from these experiences of pleasure and pain. And Ayn Rand says something like this in the Objectivist Ethics. There's a section in there where she says something like our ideas of good and bad have our first experience of good and bad comes from the experiences of pleasure and pain. Like that's where we get the concepts ultimately of good and bad. If you didn't ever have pleasure or pain, you wouldn't have any basis, I think, for the ideas of good and bad. Now, this is something you can directly experience. So it's not like you can observe is sorts of statements, but you cannot observe ought statements or statements that something is good or bad. Because if you directly experience pleasure and pain, you experience them as good or as bad in the case of pain. It's not like it's a separate step. Like, okay, now first I experience pleasure. Now I have to decide whether there's anything good about it. It's kind of packaged into one experience. You experience pleasure as good, and it's from that experience of pleasure as good that's the basis for evaluating anything else as good. Like the concept of good wouldn't have any meaning but for the experience of pleasure, and likewise the concept of bad wouldn't have any meaning but for the fact that you can experience pain. That's what grounds it, I think. Um, so there's not like I don't think you need some some separate faculty from your sensory faculties uh, to to observe it. I just see something says chat disconnected. Please wait while we try to reconnect you. Oh, successfully connected. Okay. I guess the chat is um, someone can verify that, or maybe I can just type something in the chat now to is the chat still working? Looks like it. Okay. Um, okay. So, I think Hume might have this view where it's more dichotomized than it actually is. Like there's not really as sharp a distinction between evaluative claims and just factual claims that, as Hume suggests. Okay, Kudababa says it seems to be working. Okay, good. Thank you for that feedback. Um, so these are other terms you could use for this issue: the fact value dichotomy. How can you get from statements about fact to statements about value? How do you get from statements of what is the case to statements about what ought to be the case or what should be the case? So these are just other terminology in which you could frame the issue. Um, but because we have these experiences of pleasure and pain, which are hardwired into us, um, I think that provides an epistemological justification for thinking that certain things are good and certain things are bad. And these ultimately correlate with life and death. So pleasure is correlated with life, pain is correlated with death, um, at least in the long run. Now, there can be, you can, so this is something you have to learn over time. Initially, as an infant, you just have these immediate sensations of pleasure and pain. But as you mature, you learn to take a more long range perspective on things like pleasure and pain. And an example I often give is going to the dentist. That causes you pain, but that doesn't mean it's a bad thing to go to the dentist. I mean, assuming like this is before the age of anesthesia and they can't just numb your mouth, you might have to choose, unfortunately, to just endure some pain to get your teeth fixed. But that doesn't mean it's a bad thing to go there. Like I was saying before, the concept of pain is what gives rise to the concept of, or sorry, the experience of pain is what gives rise to our concept of bad. Um, but that doesn't mean it's bad to go to the dentist because you're experiencing pain. Because if you take a long run view of what's going on, well, you would experience more pain overall if you didn't get that tooth taken care of. So um, by enduring some pain in the immediate moments, your long run pain is less. So your overall, if you take a longer run view of it, I think you'll see that pain actually does correlate with death and destruction of life, Likewise, if you take a long run view of pleasure, pleasure does correlate with life. Um, and that's something you need to learn over time. And there are other examples of this. Um, if you just eat pizza and ice cream, that might taste really pleasurable in the moment, but the next day you might have an upset stomach, and you consider the long run consequences. You're actually not experiencing a net increase in pleasure if you just eat junk food all the time. Now, there's another level to all of this. There's the purely physiological level, but then there's also the more emotional level. So there's also things like happiness and misery, which are they are more impacted by the ideas you hold. So instead of just being an immediate physiological reaction to something, in the way that like a baby drinking milk has this physiological reaction that causes it to experience pleasure, assuming it's hungry. Um, to experience something like happiness or joy, that's not just a physiological thing. That has that experience, that emotional experience of joy, let's say, has ideas you hold that mediate between some fact or event in the world and then your emotional experience. So it might seem kind of floating. So let me see if I can give a more concrete example. Let's say you get a raise at a job and you experience an emotion of joy as a result of that raise. Well, that assumes that you hold a certain idea, namely that it's good to have money, that money makes your life better. If you thought that money was the root of all evil, maybe if you're a Christian and you're an ascetic and you think that, the things of this world, worldly things like money, which allow you to buy stuff, um, is actually evil, and you should get rid of your money and live a life of poverty. Then you might have a very opposite emotional reaction to something like you get a raise or someone else gets a raise. You might think, oh, this person is being corrupted by the temptations of this world. You'll have a very different sort of emotional response because you have this other ideology, this other set of ideas that mediates between the fact of someone getting a raise and then the emotional response to the raise. Um, Now, I think uh, as I was saying before, there's a correlation, at least in the long run, between pleasure in life. I think there's also a correlation on the emotional level between uh, emotions like joy and happiness in life. And likewise, on the negative side, there's a correlation between pain and death. That's just physiological pain. But on the emotional side, or the emotional level, there's also a correlation in the long run between an emotion like misery or suffering or anxiety and death. Okay, so there's a little discourse on where we get these ideas of good and bad and how to bridge the is-ought gap. You might think there's not really much of a gap to bridge in the first place if you look at it from the right perspective. If you're already from the beginning, you're having these uh, experiences which are sort of they come preloaded with goodness and badness in them. It's not like you experience pleasure and you don't experience it as neutral. You experience it as a good thing, and you experience pain as a bad thing. So you might think there's really not a there's not a gap to be bridged. It's only if you come at it from a Hume's perspective. I don't know exactly what influences the way he came at things. I mean, there's a lot that can be said about Hume's philosophy. He was a nominalist when it came to the issue of concepts and I don't. I talked about this a bit in another live stream. I don't know if I need to go into that now. Um, but he had certain ideas in epistemology that might be uh, leading him to hold this very dichotomized view of is and ought or fact and value. And I'm not sure if it's his views on nominalism, the way concepts are formed, um, or if it's some other aspect of his epistemology. I would want to think about that some more. But and I seem to recall from listening to Leonard Peikoff's lectures on the history of philosophy that it's because of Hume's epistemology that he ended up in a lot of the positions he ended up, like um, maybe one of them being that there is this uh, dichotomy between is and ought statements. He also famously denied the self. He said, human beings, we're just a bundle of sensations. I think that was one of his ways of putting it. Um, that, you have an experience of, like right now, I'm experiencing, um, I see my laptop in front of me and I see a window off to my left and I hear my voice. And right now I hear a different sound than I was hearing a second ago. Um, a few seconds ago, I said, I see a window, but now I'm hearing, now I'm hearing. So, uh, I'm just this stream of sensations, but there's really no unitary self that unites it all. Now, you might say there's a stolen concept if you say something like, I am just this stream of sensations. What do you mean, I am this? You're already taking a unitary kind of perspective when you say I. So I think, if I recall correctly, Leonard Peikoff says that David Hume is stealing the concept of I or the self. He also not only attacks the self, but the idea of entities, like just as you are just a bundle of sensations, likewise entities are a bundle of sensations. Like this mouse here that I'm holding up it's really not a single solitary thing. It's got some blackness. It's got a certain shape to it. Um, it's got a certain texture to it, a smooth texture. Um, but these could fly apart at any moment. It could turn into a snake. There's nothing that justifies our thinking that there are fixed, stable entities in the world. Um, I guess maybe this is kind of a way of adapting the is-ought dichotomy. There's a is necessity dichotomy. Like we can see it is the case that this mouse has these qualities at this time, but we can't see it's necessarily the case that it has these qualities. For all we know, it could be that, 10 seconds later, all these qualities fly apart or that it turns into a basketball. Um, we can't say just because it is the case that it has these qualities now, it will necessarily be the case that it has these qualities permanently. Um, but just out of laziness or habit or custom, uh, we tend to think of the world as composed of these fixed, stable, enduring entities. But there's really no justification for that on Hume's view. So Hume, he destroys our what you might call common sense beliefs in many things like causality, the nature of the self, the idea that there are entities, fixed, enduring, stable objects. He also attacks induction. So I think I don't know if someone's called him the wrecking ball. I've heard him called the wrecking ball. I don't know if someone famous gave him that name, but anyways, you can see why he was called that because he demolished all these very core ideas at the root of our worldview, the Western worldview in any case. And then Kant came along and tried to uh, put the world back together, and he had a way of attempting to do that, which I also talked about in a previous stream a bit. But anyways, I've been going on for a while here, but let me come back to the chat because my I want to engage with the chat. Um, a big part of the purpose here is to engage with people. So um, I don't want to just monologue the whole time. Um, so let's see what other comments have come in. Oh, we got another new person, at least one that I don't recognize before. So Chachi Chocha Corta says, welcome to the channel, by the way. He says, Miss Rand mentioned in one of her essays that capitalism is the greatest political system on earth. However, it is not perfect. What parts of capitalism are not perfect in your estimation? Okay, so I think you're not saying that Ayn Rand said it wasn't perfect. That's that's what you're saying. You're saying on Rand's view, capitalism was the greatest political system, but you are saying it's not perfect. What parts are not perfect in my estimate? Well, I would question the assumption there. It looks like I, you're assuming that capitalism is not perfect, and I would want to know why you think that. So if you have a reasonable standard for what constitutes perfection, um, then like if you think perfection means that uh, the system has to deliver immortality to people, like if people don't live forever, if they eventually die, then there's a problem with the system. Like if that's your standard of perfection, I would say that's not a reasonable standard to hold. And um, there it's so you wouldn't. It's not right to say capitalism is not perfect on the grounds of the fact that people are immortal and they die. It's not meant to solve that sort of problem or that sort of issue. But if you do have a reasonable standard of perfection, then or of what it is to be a good political system, then I think I would just say capitalism is good or it's perfect. I don't see how you can make a better system. So I would want to know uh, what what would lead you to think that if you do think that capitalism is not a perfect system, why would you think that? And then I like if people are dying in the streets all the time, when you start to implement capitalism, like there are all these claims about the history of capitalism, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, um, or that in the 19th century, which was of the United States, which was arguably, I think, the closest time to capitalism there's been in history, that this was a period of misery and people were dying in the streets. I think a lot of this is just mythology. Um, if things like that were actually true, then I think that would raise a serious question as to whether that would provide some grounds for thinking it's not a perfect system. But I think there's a lot of just mythology that is the basis of the idea that it's not a good or a perfect system and that it could be improved upon. Ayn Rand's book, she wrote a book called Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal, which deals with the theory and the history of capitalism, and it dispels a lot of the myths surrounding capitalism. A lot of the problems uh, in society are often blamed on capitalism, but like today, even, we've got these, like healthcare is an issue. You have this guy, Luigi Mangione, who murdered a healthcare CEO, and people will say, "Oh, well, um, he's giving vent to the frustrations people have with our capitalist system." I think you hear things like this sort of idea. But we have far from a capitalist system. We have massive government intervention into the society, including the healthcare system. All kinds of regulations. It's government is spending a large portion of the money that is spent on healthcare through these many billions of dollar programs like Medicare and Medicaid. Um, there are many regulations which interfere with the actual free market in healthcare, and I think our healthcare market, which would be much better if we did have capitalism or a free market when it came to healthcare. Um, so if you're talking about actual capitalism, which on Ayn Rand's view means the government is not interfering in the free markets at all through taxes or regulations, if it's restricted to the role of protecting people from force, so it just has a police and the military and then a court system to peacefully settle disputes, if that's it, the government doesn't have these programs like Social Security, Medicare, public education, um, then I think things would be much better. Um, but in any case, it's certainly not like that today. We have massive government intervention, so we have to be very clear on what is and isn't capitalism. I have a whole video on that. I think the it might just be titled "What is Capitalism?" So, if you're not familiar with Rand's view, um, you can read her writings, or you can also check out some of my videos like that one on what is capitalism. Okay, I see some more comments coming in, and so I'm bouncing around a bit here. So we started on the is-ought issue, and I gave that some time, but I also wanted to give some time to some of the other comments that are coming in. But let me see if there's. It doesn't look like anybody has tried to call into Zoom yet. If anyone wants to do a live call, I put the link in the chat. Let me pin it actually so it doesn't get lost. Okay, I just pinned the Zoom link. So if you want to do a live call, anyone out there, feel free to just click on the Zoom link. And if you also let me know in the chat that you did that, um, that will help me see sooner that someone wants to do a call. Because right now I'm looking at the YouTube chat. I don't always have my eye on Zoom. So if you let me know in the YouTube chat that you want to do a call, uh, uh, then I might see sooner that you want to come on. And maybe also indicate what you want to talk about. I guess you don't have to do that, but it might be good to just say a few words on what you're interested in discussing in the chat. Okay, so let me read through some other of these comments, and I want to also spread it around the time, so I don't want to spend the entire time talking about one person's comment and not have time to address other comments. Um, so uh, let's see what else is in here. But as I said before, if you want to get priority, then you can't super chat yet because I can't do that until I hit 1,000 subscribers and apply to YouTube to be monetized. But what you can do is sign up on Patreon or send me PayPal, and then I will get priority to your to engaging with you. Um, Now I'm not usually checking that during a live stream because I haven't really it hasn't occurred to me to do that before. But so maybe if you do want to make a donation, then just say that in chat, um, and then I'll look for it and make sure it came through, and then I'll give you more time. Um, so, but I guess you might want to be anonymous. Sometimes people want to be anonymous if they make a donation. Uh, but I guess you're not going to be anonymous if you're doing a super chat. And if you know that I'm spending more time on you, I'll probably I would want to say that I'm doing that, so people know why I'm spending. Yeah, so I guess you can't be anonymous. I guess for now, yeah, um, there's you can't be anonymous if you want to get more time by making a donation. So just speak up and say something in the chat. Say you made a donation on PayPal or Patreon, and then I'll check that to see if it came through. And and then, but I guess that's for right now. If you could be more secretive about it, maybe in the future, like if you after the stream, if you want to send a donation, then I could, uh, yeah, I could just check it later, Well, I got to think about this more, exactly how I'm going to handle um, income but for now, everything is not anonymous. Just it's it's all going to be it's going to be I guess what you could do, you could just tell me. You have to be explicit. Tell me you want it to be anonymous if you make a donation, and then I won't mention it. Otherwise, I might mention it. So, okay. Um, so let me look at some more of these chats. Glad to see we've had a consistent presence of around 10 people. I think that's more than in previous live streams. It's usually been in the single digits, but now it's been stable in the double digits for a while. That's I think a record. And I'm just looking at my analytics on my phone right now. Wow, I think there's another record there in the first hour, in the 1 p.m. hour Pacific time. 36 people have come by. So I can see here the total people who have come by as opposed to just the people who are simultaneously watching right now. It's nice to be able to see both. Um, and I picked up a few subscribers in the last few days, so that was good to see as well. That reminds me, I appreciate the likes and the subscribes. So that's another way you can help support the channel. In addition to financial support, just having likes and getting more subscribers is helpful as well. So if you like the stream, then I'd appreciate it if you give it a like, hit that thumb up button, and then if you're not subscribed and you want to help the channel grow and get notified of my content, definitely appreciate new subscribers. And of course, sharing, commenting, all that engagement is good. All right, so let me now go back to the chat and see what new comments have come in. Okay, we got some more from Primal. He's talking about the Izod gap, I see. He says they don't want to take a rational view that bridges the gap, but some way that gap has to be bridged. One has to know what ought to do, then somehow it makes sense for them to take the mystical answer. Yeah, I think a lot of sometimes people they'll be driven to religion and say, well, there's really no rational way to solve this problem, so we just gotta rely on this faith-based answer. Um, and I think Kant was actually he was trying to bring religion back in a way. There's this famous line from the preface to his work, The Critique of Pure Reason, which is he says, I found it necessary to deny reason in order to make room for faith. Or in some translations, I think he says, I found it necessary to deny knowledge in order to make room for faith. So yeah, I do think there's plausibly a tie there between um, there's allegedly there's a failure of reason to be able to deal with some issue, and that opens the door for mysticism or religion. But if you come at it from the right sort of framework, then you might think it's just a pseudo problem to begin with. There really is no um, sharp dichotomy between facts and values. Okay, and then Primal says, of duty, God said so. The dictator said so. I'm not sure what that's in reference to. And then we get Omni Otts. There's another new person. Welcome, Omni Otts. Uh, he says, aware of the transcendental argument for God. No, not really. I've heard of that. Actually, the person who was on the last live stream, he mentioned that, but I don't know off the top of my head what it is. I've just heard someone mention that. Um, so if you want to say what it is, feel free to. Objectivism, Ayn Rand's philosophy, is an atheist worldview. Um, sh sh so I don't know if you hold a if you're a theist, um, but in any case, my perspective, Ayn Rand's perspective, is that there is no God, um, and there's no basis for a belief in God. It's something that I think you would have to take on faith. Now, well, I mean, there are arguments for God, like Thomas Aquinas gives arguments for God. That's a different way of believing in God than just taking it on faith. But I don't think, at least I would say that I don't think there's any good argument for God. Um, but if you want to discuss that, if you want to talk about this, tell me what this transcendental argument for God is, feel free to say something about it in the chat, or if you want to come on and come on Zoom, discuss it. Um, okay, and let's see what else we. Chacha Chocha Corta says thank you, longtime follower. Oh, okay, nice. I didn't know you were a longtime follower because this is the first I've seen your name. But I guess I think doing these live streams might bring people out that have been following me for a while. And I just because they don't, I guess some people they don't leave comments on my videos or send in emails or anything. They just watch my content. But I guess some people, even though they would not do those things, they would interact in a live chat. So I get to know some more people by doing these live streams, and I like that. So nice to meet a new person here. And then he says, Ayn Rand said it was perfect. That's the question he asks. I guess referring to capitalism. I don't recall her saying that, but I would I would guess that she would say, um, well, certainly that it's good, and that maybe perfect brings in more of a perspective of degrees. Um, so something can be more and less perfect. Something also can be more and less good. But maybe with that term perfect, it emphasizes more that this fact that there are degrees of evaluation, and perfect is like the pinnacle, the very, very top, cannot be any better at all. And I don't recall her saying that, but maybe if you asked her, she would say, yeah, it's perfect because there's no way you can make a better social system. Now, I don't speak for her, but I would guess that if asked or pressed on this issue, whether capitalism is perfect, that she would say it's perfect um, as a social system, and which is the way to judge it, not as something else, as a cure for mortality or something, as I was saying before. Like it would be, I don't think it would be a rational standard to hold to judge a social system by whether it cures mortality, right? But if you have a rational standard of judgment, then um, I think she would say, I would guess she would say it's perfect. Okay, and then Chachi also says the essence of my question is whether you find any fault with capitalism. No, I don't. I don't see any problem with it properly understood. As I was mentioning, I think capitalism is often misunderstood, and people will often say, like, today's system in the United States is capitalism, which I think is a misunderstanding of it. But if you understand it as Rand does, as there's a government, it's not an anarchy, contrary to libertarianism, or at least many libertarians. That's another misunderstanding that I think a lot of people have. They might think I'm in favor of uh, I'm opposed to the state or the government. I'm not. I think there should be a government. It just should have a very limited role. It should be limited to the protection of individual rights, which means protecting people from physical force, which is why it only has these basically just three functions: the police, the military, and then the courts. to peacefully settle disputes between people so they don't have to resort to force. But uh, I don't see any fault with that system. And if you think there is a fault, I would be interested to hear what fault you think it has, and then we could talk about that. And then okay, so let me go on some more. Primal says capitalism is perfect. Whatever the result of freedom is, which is what capitalism is just. Um, yeah, I think I would agree to that. Um, and Primal says it is what it is. That's like another way of saying A is A. Sometimes people say that. Um, Often, I think when it's like they want to come to terms with something, like maybe there's some kind of misfortune in their life. Um, they get laid off at work, for instance, and then someone tries to console them, and they'll reply in reply to the consolation, they'll say, "Oh, well, it is what it is." And I think there's something good about that because it can be a way of recognizing the facts, like saying, "All right, well, I gotta just accept that that's the way things are and move on. I can't just forever hope or wish that things were different. Um, uh, I can't just wish away these unpleasant facts. I've got to um, accept it, and that's a precondition of being able to move on and improve um, and make your life go better. There might be other ways in which it's used in an unhealthy way, like settling for something that doesn't have to be the case. Um, like, I don't know, the only certainties in life are death and taxes. And, well, it is what it is. So I just got to come to terms with that. Now, it may be true, at least in the short run, that you can't get rid of something like taxes or death. But, maybe in the long run, in a very long run, they're not metaphysically givens like absolutes. There was a time in America's history when there weren't income taxes. Earlier in its history, there were tariffs, but they were, uh, I guess, um, people had much more control over their property. I think in the 19th century, at least in the late 19th century, it wasn't always the case that we had a massive welfare state and that people, were forking over 20, 30, 40% of their incomes every year. It doesn't have to be like that. So that would be a case where if you say it is what it is about taxes as a kind of giving up and not trying to make things better, then I think that would be an invalid or misuse of that sort of idea. If it implies like, well, we can't make anything different, and even death, right? There's something like there is life extension. People are working on that, trying to make our lives longer, and we live much longer these days than caveman lived. Maybe the average age used to be somewhere you lived into your 20s, but now people regularly live into their 70s, 80s, 90s. Maybe eventually you'll be able to live to like 500. I don't know. Go on forever if you want to. Doesn't mean you'll be incapable of ever dying, but at least you have the option of whether to die. Maybe one day uh, we would be so advanced that it's up to you whether you continue living or not. Um, okay, let me get through some more of these. Primal says there can be no fault with capitalism because there can be no fault with freedom. Primal says perfect in a rational sense, just as one can achieve moral perfection if one follows objective moral principles and not do evil knowingly. Harry Benswanger has an article. He's an objectivist philosopher, for anyone who doesn't know, who actually knew Ayn Rand. And He was her friend for during the last part of her life. He has an article called "The Possible Dream," and he argues in there that if you have a rational standard of perfection, then moral perfection is possible and and necessary. Not only is it possible, it's also necessary. I think that's, I think he says that. I recall that both of those points are made at least somewhere in the objectivist literature. Uh, so if you think moral perfection means like giving up worldly things, like a religious person might, if you're a religious ascetic, then I think that would be a irrational or non-rational standard of perfection, which you can't achieve insofar as you're going to live, right? Because if you just if you give up all values consistently, you're going to die. So you have to cheat on it. You have to be inconsistent if you're going to adhere to an ascetic, self-sacrificing code of morality. You can't consistently be self-sacrificing. But if you have a rational code of morality, which uh, I think means one that correlates with life, then you can be consistent about that sort of code. And you need to be consistent. To not be consistent is to go away from life. It's to go in the direction of death, and that's not a good thing. I mean, assuming we're talking about the life like a flourishing, happy life. Like if you're there are cases, tragic cases where it could be rational to end your life, like if you have a terminal illness, which is very painful, or if you're caught in a dictatorship. But life, qua rational being, where you can live uh, by reason and pursue, or you have the ability to pursue happiness, that's an option that's open to you. In that case, pursuing life is possible and good. Okay. I'm trying to go through these in order, but keep in mind how much time I've spent on various people's comments so that I spread the time around a bit. Um, so here's one more from Chachi. He says, is it okay to ask questions about historical events in Ayn Rand's life? I understand that Dr. Shoshana Milgram would probably serve best at that capacity, but if you are willing, I'd ask my question. Um, sure. You can ask questions about Ayn Rand's life, and I guess I can't guarantee I'll have the answer, of course, or even if I do know the answer, maybe it's just not something I want to talk about. So I guess I won't guarantee an answer, but you can certainly ask the question, and if I have something to say, I'll say it. All right, Mark Thomas is back. Hi, Mark. I've seen you in some previous live streams. He says European mystic G.I. Gurdjieff actually took inspiration from Kant's. Oh, you mean Kant's logical cop out. Okay, I guess you're giving an example of what I was talking about before, where some people retreat from reason and uh, they when reason allegedly fails, they go in a mystical religious direction, and this is someone who you're saying looks like you're saying this person did that sort of thing. Okay, I haven't heard of this person, but okay, thanks for the contributing that example. And then Chachi says, I've been watching your videos for a while. I love especially when you debate other YouTubers live. Oh, okay, nice. Yeah, I actually did that yesterday. I don't know if you were here at the beginning of the stream, but I mentioned that last night I called into the show of another YouTuber, and he's got over 24,000 subscribers, and I don't know how many were watching live. I think he's on different platforms, and even within YouTube. I think he sometimes he would restart his stream like in the middle of a live stream. He must stream from some other platform, I guess. I don't know if it's OBS or what, but he restarts his YouTube stream. So there's like six different videos on YouTube, which corresponds to one live stream he did yesterday. But anyways, I called into one of those streams, and that'll eventually end up on my channel. It was about an hour discussion. I won't say what his name is, because I guess I want to see if I can preserve the viewers for when the video comes up on my channel. Um, I don't know if that's a good policy to have, but at least for now, I think I'll just not mention his name. And there was another YouTuber whose stream I was on. Well, I guess that wasn't a live stream; that was a pre-recorded one. But that'll also end up on my channel. Um, so good to hear that. Yeah, I didn't know until like I actually called into a show that I was going to be on there. Otherwise, maybe I could have announced it on Facebook or Twitter or X, and then other people could have watched it live. Um, Sometimes I like to see how it goes before I announce it. Um, but yeah, I guess I don't have a fixed policy on whether to announce it in advance. But that reminds me, maybe I should put out an announcement on Facebook and X right now that I'm streaming. Maybe get some more people over here. Um, so it's let's see, how long? I think I'll go till at least 2:30 Pacific today. Um, Maybe I'll go longer, depending on what kind of engagement I get. Uh, but I think I'll go till at least 2:30. And let's say, is that enough time to justify putting out a Facebook or Twitter? Or maybe hmm, I guess I'll do it a little different today. I won't, maybe I'll just announce it after the live stream that I did a live stream. Yeah, because so far I've had enough engagement in the chat. It's not like it's been short of people to engage with, so that I want to get other people over here. So I guess I'll just stick with YouTube for now. Um, okay, so let me go through some more of these comments. Where did I leave off? I'm at the Joe Broomer. Joe, hi. You're another new person, so welcome to the channel. At least new to me. Maybe like Chachi, you've been here for a while, and I just haven't seen you excuse me, until now. Joe asks, is there some connection between Rand and Max Stirner? I know very little about Stirner, but the connection I've heard is that they're both egoists of some sort. Now, I've also heard that Max Stirner is a very different kind of egoist. He's more of the Nietzschean sort of egoists, um, where y- your self-interest consists in like ruling over others, having power over others, as opposed to um, recognizing others as equals, um, as sovereign individuals, just like you are. It's more of a kind of exploit and be exploited worldview rather than a harmonious kind of egoism that Rand acknowledges. So it's more like the kind of brute, the stereotypical um, conception of egoism or selfishness, where um, the good thing to do is pursue your own interest, and that involves um, doing things at the expense of other people. So trampling on their rights, lying to them, robbing, raping, pillaging, murdering. The stereotypical Attila Brute sort of conception of egoism. So that's exactly what Rand was trying to distinguish her view of egoism from. She wrote a book called The Virtue of Selfishness, and the subtitle of it, the subtitle was A New Concept of Egoism. And I think she's trying to distinguish herself from people like Stirner, based on what I've heard about Stirner. Okay, going on to Omniot. He says X is the necessary condition of Y. Therefore, X. Oh, Y therefore X. X being God. Oh, okay. So I guess this is the transcendental arguments that you referred to. Were you the one who asked about the? I'm just scrolling back to see if I. Oh yeah, yeah. You're the one who asked about the transcendental argument for God. So I guess this is your statement of what it is. X is the necessary condition of Y. Y, therefore X. X being God. Specifically Orthodox Christian metaphysic. Y being the transcendentals, logic, math, meaning. Okay. Uh, so I get the basic idea. So if you say X is necessary for Y, and then Y is the case, well, therefore X must be the case. Um, because you wouldn't have Y without X. That's what it means to say X is necessary. It's a necessary condition for Y. So if you have Y, you have X. Um, so what would be an example of that? Um, uh, um, let's say water is a necessary condition for plant growth. So if you have plant growth, you must have water, right? So let's say you don't absorb the water, you don't see anybody watering the plant, you didn't see a particular plant getting rained on, but you do see the plant is growing. It's taller than it was last week, let's say. And since you know that water is necessary for plant growth, and you observe the plant growth, well, then you know that it must be getting water. So that's the basic structure of the argument, and then I guess, the idea is that uh, um, logic. What were the examples? Oh, logic, math, or God is necessary for these things, logic, math, and meaning. And since there are these things, logic, math, and meaning, therefore there must be God. Um, so one thought on this is what exactly is meant by God. So you put in parentheses there specifically Orthodox Christian metaphysics. So I guess you're referring to the Christian God, or at least a certain version of the Christian God. But so if that's what you mean by God, I question whether that is really coherent just on its own. So that, which is a prior question to whether such a thing, assuming it has some kind of coherence to it, is necessary for logic, math, and meaning. Like, could it be the case that you have logic, math, and meaning independent, separate from a God? Um, and to ask that question, it presupposes, well, what do you mean by God? So we have to be clear on that. And if you dig into that, I'm not sure you're going to come up with a coherent answer, which kind of pulls the rug out from the later question um, of whether you need God, whether God is necessary for logic method, meaning it would just be an incoherent question if the term you use in the question, namely God, is itself incoherent. So um, I think one thing that Ayn Rand's philosophy sensitizes people to is that you can't take for granted that just because some people use a term like God, that it can perform a valid function in an argument. If there's something corrupt about the term itself or something invalid about the term, which may be the case, then it invalidates any thought process in which it's used. It invalidates any inference in which it's used. So I don't think God is a valid concept. I think Ayn Rand actually discusses God, the concept of God, in the appendix to one of her books, Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology. She presents a theory of concept formation in that book, and in the appendix to it, the concept of God is discussed, and I believe she says it's an invalid concept. There's nothing, uh, there's no basis, there's no rational basis for that concept, nothing that gives rise to that concept. And we could talk more about why that is. Maybe just thinking off the top of my head as to why maybe it's an invalid concept. If it is an invalid concept, is, can you really make sense of omnipotence? This is a quality which is often attributed to the Christian God, at least. He's omnipotent, so he's all powerful. Well, does that mean he can create a rock that he can't lift? Well, does that generate some kind of paradox? Either he can create the rock or he can't lift it. But in either case, there's something he can't do. So, but then is he really all powerful? You might think there's just logical incoherence in that concept. So, and because that's one of the attributes of God, at least as traditionally conceived, then that's an invalid concept. There might be other reasons to think God is an invalid concept. But in any case, I don't think this question really gets off the ground until you have since I don't think it's made in terms of valid concepts. So I guess it kind of goes by or similarly, as I was saying before, like the question of, well, how do you bridge the is-ought gap? That question might not actually get off the ground. If you come at it from a certain perspective, you might think it's just what gives rise to the question is something invalid or there's something off about the perspective you're coming to it from. Um, okay, let me go through some more of these comments though. So then there's another comment from Omni Aughts. Omni Aughts says Gödel's incompleteness theorem showing that circulatory at the meta level / worldview level is unavoidable. Okay, I don't know much about Gödel's incompleteness theorem. I can't comment on that. Harry Binswanger, who I mentioned before, he's an objectivist philosopher. He's done work in the philosophy of mathematics, and I know that he has discussed Gödel's incompleteness theorem. Uh, I'm not sure if he discusses that in his book. He has a book called How We Know, and maybe it's there, but I think also he has a discussion forum. It's behind a paywall, but you can get a free trial subscription. Um, and if you join his online forum, it's called HB Letter. If you go to hbletter.com, you can find his web discussion forum, and there's been some discussion on there, I think, about Gödel's incompleteness theorem. So you might be interested in checking that out. So those are just a couple sources off the top of my head, which you might want to look at. But I don't know enough about it myself to address it. Um, you can also just Google uh, Gödel's incompleteness theorem, and then maybe add objectivism, and Harry Binswanger. Maybe that'll turn up something that's not behind a paywall online. I don't know. And I see you just corrected a spelling. You said circularity, Gödel's incompleteness theorem, showing that circularity at the meta level slash worldview level is unavoidable. Yeah, that's beyond me to address. So I'll have to outsource that question to others. Okay, and then Joe Broomer comes back with he asks, is it possible on your view for freedom to be constrained by some entity other than a government? Yes, your common criminal constrains freedom, and he's not a government. Uh, so that's certainly possible. Anyone who, a rapist, someone who kidnaps people, that person is constraining your freedom, but is not the government. And in fact, it's the role of the government to use retaliatory force against those sorts of people, get them off the streets, um, so they stop constraining other people's freedom. So the robber, the raper, the murderist, the murderer, these are people who initiate force against others. And then the police uh, uses retaliatory force to stop their initiation of force. At least ideally, that's what the police should do. Um, okay, Omniot comes back with if you want someone to come on and defend that position, contact Madibi Jim Bob. Okay. I've heard of someone called Jim Bob. I'm not sure if that's the person you have in mind on some other channel. Uh, but so if I want someone to defend the transcendental argument for God, then you're suggesting I contact Mataby Jim Bob. Okay. I'm not particularly interested in arguing that issue. Um, so I doubt I'm going to reach out to him. But I mean, if he wants to come by, if he wants to take the initiative, then I would be open to him coming by. So if you want to reach out to him uh, and tell him about my stream, now there might be a certain limit I would put on that. There's certain topics which uh, I'm either not knowledgeable enough about, like I was saying, the Gödel's incompleteness theorem, or that I'm just not interested in. Um, that would are going to put a limit on how much time I devote to it. Um, but I would give it at least some time. Um, unless if I find out about something that makes me not want to talk to the person, like irrespective of the topic. Like if I find out someone is a robber or a raper or a murderer, then even if they somehow find my stream, I'm not going to want to chat with them. But um, I don't innocent until proven guilty, right? So if he wants to come on my stream or get in touch with me somehow and have a discussion, I would at least have a little conversation for a few minutes. I don't know if I would want to talk about it for a whole hour or more, but I'd give it at least a little time. But I think I would leave the initiative to him on this one. I guess there are certain topics where I'd be more likely to take the initiative and reach out. But um, okay, Chachi says Stirner egoism from Wikipedia. And then he doesn't use quotes, but he has a colon. So maybe this is a quote. He says, Stirner's egoism argues that individuals are impossible to fully comprehend, as no understanding of the self can adequately describe the fullness of experience. Okay. So it looks like Stirner might have some views deep views in metaphysics or epistemology that are affecting the way he conceives of egoism. And I don't know anything about that. I've just heard what I said before. Like he has this kind of brute conception of egoism. Even that I can't vouch for myself firsthand. I think I've heard people describe it that way, but this certainly I don't think I've even heard secondhand. Um, so, but just as you describe it, it looks like his view of egoism is being influenced by his metaphysics or epistemology. And then Chachi says. Stirner has been broadly understood as containing traits of both psychological egoism and rational egoism. Okay, psychological egoism, for anyone who doesn't know, is the idea that people, just by nature, it's just a fact that they pursue their own interest. It's not a choice. So you might think this is well, I think it's a deterministic kind of view. People just have to, given their nature, pursue their interests. And that's always what everyone is doing. Even someone like Mother Teresa, who you might think is an altruist, really deep down, if you analyze it enough, she's doing what she's doing, helping the sick or the poor, or giving up her her possessions to live a poor life in India, helping the sick and the poor. Really, she's doing that because she thinks it's best for herself. She's getting some kind of benefit from it. She's getting some kind of satisfaction from it. So that's the idea of psychological egoism. Everyone always necessarily is doing what they think is best for themselves. It's not an issue of choice. Whereas on Ayn Rand's view, it is an issue of choice, and you're not deterministic. You have free will, and in fact, often, maybe usually, people are not doing pursuing what's in their best interest. There are millions, billions of people who have been infected, you might say, with altruism and think that it's good to live the sort of life that Mother Teresa lives. And even if they don't do it themselves, they at least hold it as an ideal to aspire to or to admire, and to make them feel guilty that they're not living up to that sort of life. They might feel they have to compromise morally, and they got to be practical, be more practical. But the really moral thing to do would be to live this other sort of life. Um, so on Rand's view, many people are not living a life that is actually egoistic. Um, okay. Chachi also says, unlike the self-interest described by Ayn Rand, Stirner did not address individual self-interest, selfishness, or prescriptions for how one should act. He urged individuals to decide for themselves. Well, I guess I don't see why he would make prescriptions about how you should act if he holds psychological egoism. Now, maybe he's inconsistent. I certainly think people sometimes are when it comes to free will and determinism. Like there's many people are what's called compatibilists. They think you can be both determined and also have free will. I don't think that's consistent. Um, and maybe Stirner is like that. But if he actually does hold psychological egoism, which means that people, just by nature, they don't have a choice about whether to pursue their own interest. If they just by nature pursue their interest, then um, where would be the place for prescriptions telling people how they should act? Or is it that maybe it's a more kind of fine-grained prescription. Like maybe they don't have a choice about whether to pursue their self-interest on his view, but exactly how they pursue their interest, maybe he has prescriptions about that. Maybe that's a consistent view. So I'm not sure how determinist he is. Like at what level of grain are people determined both to pursue their interest and to pursue it in a certain way? In that case, um, I don't see how it would make sense to make prescriptions. Um, or to tell people how to decide for them, or to tell people to decide for themselves. Do they really have a choice? Um, okay. Omniot says, watch Jay Dyer's debate with Matt Dillahunty to see a display of the transcendental argument for God position, or with Stefan Molyneux. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for the reference. Um, I'm not really interested in that topic, so I doubt I'm going to look into that. There's so many other things I am interested in, and I am already, they're competing. Those interests I already have are competing with each other for my time. Well, I mean, I'm deciding among them, but this one just, um, given all the other things I'm interested in pursuing, I doubt I'm going to want to devote time to that. But again, like if he wants to take the initiative and contact me, or if one of these people does, then I would spend some more time on it. Audience is also an issue, like audience size, because part of, I mean, a big part of what I want to accomplish with this channel is to spread Ayn Rand's ideas. So if one of these people had a big audience and I had a chance to um, go in front of their audience and give my perspective, then I would more likely want to invest some time to looking into the material. And so I would be more knowledgeable going into a discussion with them. But um, yeah, right now I'm not in that kind of position. So I don't think I'm going to put much time into learning about that. I guess, are you, maybe you're religious? If you're, I don't know if you want to indicate what your position is, but I mean, do you think this is a good argument? Do you believe in God? Do you believe in, do you take things on faith? Um, are you, I'm only pro-faith. Like I'm anti-faith. Sorry, did I say I'm pro-faith? That was I misspoke. I'm pro-reason and anti-faith. Um, so I don't know if you want to, I guess I'm more interested in right now engaging with you because you're here. Um, so if you want to tell me more about your view, then I could engage with that. Okay, and then Mark Thomas says Stirner's egoism is markedly different in caps from Rand. Might we send you some info on him for a future show? Sure, you can send me anything. I'm not gonna, I can't guarantee I'm gonna look at it. I'll I'll take a glance at it and I'll make a decision as to whether it's something I want to spend a significant amount of time on. But I certainly welcome you sending me suggestions for things I might discuss in future shows. So yeah, feel free to send. You can email me at theselfishnessproject@gmail.com. That's the email. It's posted on my about page on my YouTube channel. Or if you're connected with me on Discord, you can send me it there, or you can DM me on Discord or X or Facebook. I'm not sure where your contact. So yeah, feel free to send me anything, and then I'll take at least a brief look at it, and then maybe I'll discuss it more in a future show. All right, it is 2:30 now, and I promised to be here at least until 2:30 Pacific, and then depending on how the engagement is, I would stick around for longer. Um, I'm just taking a quick look now on my list of notes to see if there's anything I wanted to say before I end this stream. No, I don't really see anything that I want to say. Um, so uh, maybe I'll end the stream soon. But I see another let me just see what this last comment came in from Omni Ots. He says, um, last one, oh, last comment, I guess you mean. Last one, then I'm gone. Jay has 160,000 subs. Jim Bob has 21,000. Jay regularly hosts open panel debates through X Spaces. Okay. Yeah, I've heard of these people. I just haven't spent a lot of time looking at their channels. They're, I guess, particularly interested in religion because they are religious, I guess, and they like to talk about that. And I don't spend a lot of time thinking about that, but maybe it's worth trying to get on one of their platforms. I would have to think about if there's a topic that would be good for me to discuss on their platforms and what kind of preparation, if any, it would require. I don't know if they have like a live call-in show like this one, um, which is just pretty impromptu and informal and uh, might be worth going on. Yeah, so I'll keep that in the back of my mind and maybe I'll look into it some more and eventually try to get on there. In any case, I do appreciate the suggestion. So thank you for that. And I encourage any other suggestions on platforms I might go on. Okay. I think this is a good time to end the stream. Gotten through all the chat comments and no one's called in. I guess I'll give people like 1 or 2 minutes in case anyone tries to want to get in at the very last minute before I end the stream. I'm glad I haven't had to make the stream go dark, so to speak, in the last few that I've done. Like there were previous live streams when there just wasn't engagement after a while. And so I just turned off my mic and camera and said, I'm still here. And just let me know in the chat if you want to come back. And then I'll come back on camera and we can engage some. But in my last few streams, I haven't had to do that. It's been consistent engagement and I've had things to say the whole time. So I'm pleased with that. That's good. So thank you all for coming by. Um, and I guess before I end the stream, I'll just say again, if you're here and you like the stream and you want to help the channel grow, I'd appreciate it if you can give the stream a like and subscribe if you're not subscribed, or at least consider subscribing. And any other kind of engagements is also helpful to the channel, sharing, commenting. Um, and then there's also Patreon or PayPal if you want to help financially. All right. Well, thanks all for coming by, and I will see you in a future live stream, hopefully. Probably Wednesday, I think, at least by Wednesday. My plan recently has been to do streams on Wednesdays and Saturdays, maybe around this time Saturdays, and I'm not sure what times on Wednesdays. But if you subscribe, you'll probably get at least and click that bell. You should get at least a notification for when I go live. All right, thanks everyone for coming by, and hope you have a good weekend. Bye bye.